Hello folks, and welcome to this week's review. And you've probably already seen the thumbnail showing a topping DAC. If you had looked at my community tab, which you can see via the channel homepage, there's a little tab, there's a few tabs, one's called playlist, one's called videos, one's called community tab. If you'd have looked in there on Thursday, you would have seen that I was going to do a topping DAC for this review, and you would have known why. And the reason why, and I'll explain this again for those who haven't seen it, the reason why I'm doing this topping DAC was because I've already done a very low cost, really cheap, I think around £140, which for a decent DAC is a low cost indeed. So £140 for, it was the Topping E30. Check out link above for the review itself. There's a video you can actually peruse at your leisure. The thing was though, I wondered, this is a Chinese sourced DAC, a Chinese company, I wondered if topping, maybe that's all they could do, maybe that was their limit, maybe they were made and maybe they were geared up for extremely cheap and cheerful DAC designs. If they push the boat out even just a bit, I wondered if they could really hack it. I wondered if they could compete, because since the E30 was reviewed, I've reviewed a few other DACs, not amazingly more expensive than the E30, around double the price, I would say. So I wondered if this new DAC that I'm about to review in this video could compete. So that's why I chose this particular topping DAC. So we're looking at the Topping D50S. In the UK, it's priced at around £250, give or take a penny or two. And that figure translates almost exactly to dollars from Amazon.com. Again, I think it's $250, give or take. The only difference I think I've seen is in the euro sector. So if you are thinking euros, you're looking around 278, 280 euros, something of that nature, but still within that general 250-ish area. Now this is a one-piece aluminium chassis. It's noticeably CNC milled. It has a solid, heavy, pretty luxurious feel to it, especially if you compare it to the cheaper Topping E30 DAC. But look, before we get into too much detail and dive down all kinds of rabbit holes, I think it's time we moved rather swiftly on, don't you? I think it's time, in fact, that we had a closer look. And welcome to the closer look section for the Topping D50S DAC. And as I say, the D50S does have a rather luxury feel and a rather luxury look, especially when you compare it to the Topping E30, the rather cheaper unit of the two. The chassis of the D50S feels solid. It feels weighty at 509 grams, including the Bluetooth aerial. Compare that to the E30's 265 grams, for example. The footprint is, well, vaguely similar-ish, I would say. 119 by 110 millimeters by 260 millimeters, instead of the E30's 100 by 125 by 320 millimeters. What the D50S does offer is, as I mentioned above, Bluetooth, the sign of which can be viewed via the stubby aerial that screws into the rear. Version 5 of Bluetooth is included here. Available in black or silver, the DAC includes a pair of ESS ES9038 Q2M Sabre DAC chips running at the incredibly high 32-bit 768 kHz PCM, or similarly high DSD512. The latter is in native mode, no less. Tweakers may be interested to know that the DAC includes an LME49720 op amp from Texas Instruments. Now this chip is actually socketed. It's not soldered directly to the board. This means that you can swap the op amp around and play around with sonic signatures, so this box can be modded. Lifting this unit from its cardboard box, you'll note the 5-volt power cable with a USB termination, but there is no included plug. You'll need to add one of those yourself. There's also a remote control that is included in the box, and well, that will look rather familiar if you're used to the Topping E30, as you can see here. Running across the front fascia, let's go left to right, shall we? And there is a power button, an OLED screen. It's a dinky little screen, but it does the job, and it's pretty high res. It's easily readable. And there's a rather interesting joystick-like output selector. Across the rear are both coax and optical ports. There's a pair of RCA outputs plus a USB socket. Bluetooth I've already mentioned, and there's a barrel shaped power socket too. If we quickly spin to the front again, that joystick controller allows you to select the filter type, and we'll talk about that in a second. There's also an option to change the brightness of the OLED screen, and you can switch to auto shut off if you like and you want to get rid of that output in its entirety. You can also decide via the screen whether to turn Bluetooth on or off. I found this a really useful option. When not in use, I turned off the Bluetooth to reduce possible digital noise. Now, before we get to the sound quality tests, let's talk about filters. Topping is not alone in offering a selection of user selectable filters, and it's also not alone in keeping them on no matter what. That is, you're unable to switch these things off. Because a DAC's filters change the sound, subtly in this case, but change is there all the same, and because you can't turn them off, it gives me the impression that the creator of this DAC chip has no real confidence in the sound profile of the basic chip itself. It's as if it's saying, well, we're not too sure of the best sound for this chip, so you decide. Here's 7 choices for you. Good luck. Bye. You certainly wouldn't find this sort of behaviour from a turntable designer, for example. He'd say, right, this is my design, this is the sound it makes, deal with it. Take it or leave it. Which is how it should be. Problem is, as I myself found when testing the older Topping E30, many people can't be bothered even looking at the included filter options, never mind actually exploring them. So they rely on the default filter sound presented by the chip itself. Problem with that is the default filter option is often slightly, well, if not bright, then a touch enhanced in the mid-range, shall we say. Now, that's great to get the attention of the new user, but not particularly wonderful for long-term listening. It's a bit like getting an amplifier with tone controls which have been moved from the neutral 0 option and glued at the 1 position. If you have no choice in the matter, and you don't with the D50S, then you need to run through them to make sure you like what you hear. And while I'm on the subject, I wish the word filters wasn't used at all. What we have here are EQ settings, or more properly, I suppose, tone controls. They're subtle tone controls, I agree, but nevertheless, that's what they are. As for what these tone controls actually do in practice, well, I can hear the differences, and I'm sure many of you will be able to as well. The effects are subtle, as I say, so just cycling through them is not a great idea if you want to hear those differences. And if you really can't hear the differences, well, fine. Just listen to your music, forget everything I've just said, and get on with your life. For everyone else, I'd recommend living with each filter for a while, get used to it, then move to the next one. The remote control features a useful button called FIR, which cycles through each filter. I would recommend comparing and contrasting over a period of time and selecting the right filter for you. My favourites were those with the word slow in them. The rest resided in various stages of being bright. I actually chose number 4, the linear phase slow roll-off filter. And yeah, those names from academia, which mean absolutely nothing at all to most people and have no place in the consumer market. They will and do scare the technophobes amongst us. They scare me, let me tell you. These names were all obviously made up by some bored digital boffin on a wet Wednesday afternoon in the dark recesses of his lab because he drank too much coffee. Imagine walking into your local supermarket and accosting some poor bloke at the frozen food section and asking him if he knows what appetizing fast roll-off filter actually means. What would he say? Maybe, sorry mate, I haven't got a clue. Have you tried the gluten-free section? Apart from recommending that you steer clear of any filter listed here with the word fast, or would you believe brick in the title, I would also avoid the single malt hypoallergenic pickled gynecologist filter, which adds, as I'm sure is obvious by the name, a dash of extra treble. Nor would I recommend the double-handed cross-court paranoid carburetor trousers filter because beside it adding a breath of extra bass, it's also the name of my new Captain Beefheart tribute album. My lawyers are already on the case. And while they're busy sending threatening letters, let's see how this DAC actually sounds, shall we? Let's go to the sound quality tests. And welcome to the sound quality tests for the Topping D50S Dac. And I began with the DAC hooked up to my Audiolab 6000 CDT transport via a coax cable, and I played a slice of Alison Moyet. This is from her Best Of album via Sony. The track was called Almost Blue, an Elvis Costello composition featuring muted trumpet, piano, string backing and low-key percussion. Now I brought in my Topping E30 DAC for direct comparison, and well, look, let's be honest here, the D50S should be far better than the E30. After all, it's twice the price, so it should be far superior. Was it though? That's the question. And if it was, in what way? As good as the E30 is for the price, and it is, the D50S shows obvious sonic superiority within the first few seconds of this track. Firstly, the D50S provides a low noise playback that allows shy and subtle details to emerge. Minor resonances from the piano, for example, the sort of stuff that hangs around the bulky wooden chassis of the instrument, could be picked up here. Next was the extra space around the soundstage, which gave the music a newfound sense of relaxation. The music was wholly at ease. In comparison, the E30 had a slightly tense, rather hunched shoulders approach. The D50S sounded confident by comparison. The extra air and space around the mid-range really helped to give the D50S, well, especially the muted trumpet on this particular track, a real organic flavour. It just helped the realism, frankly. Also, when I was comparing the E30 with the D50S, the E30, when it played the Alison Moyet vocal, the vocal sounded a bit bloomy, almost as if she was singing in a low-ceilinged room. It was as if the vocal was bouncing off the ceiling and coming back down. You sort of got a slightly bloated, not echoey, just slightly bloated feeling. The D50S, in comparison, offered an extended dynamic reach. You felt that there was more information being found around that lead vocal. It felt a little bit more naturalistic, a little bit more at ease, bit more focused as well. In bass terms, the bass guitar offered greater focus as well, while the bass notes from the piano had weight and mass and gave the song a real sense of gravitas. I then changed my reference sources and I swapped out the Topping E30 and I brought in a rather more expensive DAC, something equivalent to the D50S. This is from Soncoz. It's the LA-QXD1, and the Soncoz itself is noticeably superior to the E30. That meant that the D50S had a bit of a fight on its hands. I initially thought that the Soncoz was the more neutral and balanced between it and the D50S, but after listening to the pair for a while, that neutrality from the Soncoz actually turned out to be a rather slightly dry presentation. It was spare and minimalistic compared to the D50S, which over time I realised offered a richer and more information-filled presentation. The vocal was both emotional from the D50S, but also brimming with detail, while treble via cymbal hits, for example, were more lively and organic in their approach. What the D50S offered was a more naturalistic tonality. The D50S offered a greater sense of character. It translated the personality of the piano, the essence of the trumpet, and the nature of the bass guitar easily, while the Soncoz, well, it struggled a little. Speaking of bass guitar, that organic sense of play benefited bass, which was never chrome-plated or harsh, but more naturalistic while remaining structured. It was at this point that I moved the source to one side in its entirety, and I decided to test the USB socket instead. Now, to test the USB socket, I turned to one of the best USB related DACs I've heard on the market, especially for a low price. This was the Ifi Zen Dac. Now, the Zen Dac is USB specific. It doesn't have a coax socket. It doesn't have optical or Bluetooth for that matter. So it's a specialist unit in that respect. Through USB, I played Eric Bibb's Meeting at the Building at DSD128, a jaunty, jolly affair with a busy soundstage full of secondary percussion. There's an accordion in there, an acoustic guitar, and they throw in choral vocals by the bunch to create a melange of musical noise. The Zen Dac is a bit of a USB specialist, and well, it shows here. The D50S struggled to keep up with the Zen's inherent clarity and mid-range insight. The Zen also created a 3D effect around the stereo image that added depth to the soundstage. Also, instrumental separation was excellent via the Zen Dac. When I say instrumental separation, I literally mean that, the sense of instruments being apart and not lumped in one big lumpy blancmange block. So you can hear space in between each instrument, which enhances detail because you can sort of hear the edges of each instrument. That's what I mean by instrumental separation. The Zen Dac really had that down pat. It was something which was a feature of the Zen Dac. The D50S tried, it struggled a bit, but it didn't quite have the same performance in that area. The D50S may have wilted under the blows, but look, it did put up a good fight nevertheless. So compared to the Zen Dac, the mid-range was still very good indeed. The acoustic guitar and the banjo were a couple of highlights that I remember. The string plucks from both of those instruments were notable by their definition. Vocals as well, the choral behind the lead vocal was also sensitive and full of emotion. Bass was also good, as it offered a foundation for the track as a whole, providing a real sense of forward motion. It never slouched or bloomed or dragged, but added momentum to keep the beat moving along nicely. I then tested the Bluetooth section of the D50S and I played Marvin Gaye's Mercy Mercy Me from my phone and was pleasantly surprised at just how good this stream sounded. Yes, this was a lossy file I was playing, but even so, the output was open, clear, never bright or metallic in nature. In fact, and I mentioned instrumental separation earlier, that element of the soundstage really struck me here, as the soundstage offered a broad and spacious presentation. The secondary percussion, including bells, were notable in being well behaved and disciplined, while the rather shy rhythm guitar took a fuller part than usual in the mix, adding richness and complexity. So how do I conclude the review of the Topping D50S Dac? Well, this is a compact unit. It's a fully featured DAC. It's also an easy to use DAC. The interface is pretty easy to use. I didn't have any issues with it at all. It's also well built, and it offers a generally excellent level of play across all of the available sources. Sure, it struggled a bit against the Zen Dac, but as I say, and I repeat, the Zen Dac is a specialist item, and the Zen Dac doesn't have Bluetooth, it doesn't have optical, it doesn't have coax. So you've got to bear all of that in mind. As it is, the overall level of sound quality from this Topping DAC is excellent, providing superb value for a general hi-fi setup. And I can see this DAC being used in all kinds of different systems, whether you've got a second hi-fi system and you want to put that, say, in a spare bedroom, or you're living in a bedsit and you haven't got any space at all. The very small footprint will be ideal in those circumstances. Also, if you've got a near field setup, literally where the speakers are near to you, like a PC setup or some sort of computer-based desk setup, the D50S will be excellent for that sort of hi-fi chain. Even if you've just got a full-size hi-fi setup, it'll do very well and perform excellently within that whole setup. So there's lots of flexibility with the D50S, apart from, as I say, the D50S sounding generally very nice indeed. This is a great little design and I highly recommend it. And if you'd like to buy one, I will put an affiliate link down below. But that's me done, folks. Thank you very much for sticking with me to the end of this particular video, and I do appreciate your support. I say this every single time, but I really do appreciate your support, so thank you for sticking with me. If you could click on the like button, which helps to push this video into YouTube and, you know, gets entangled with all those juicy algorithms, that would be a great help. Also the subscribe button, that would be useful too. Don't forget my Patreon page, which is going great guns at the moment. All kinds of exclusive videos, buyer's guides, all kinds of different features to read. There's all kinds of stuff on there. There's all kinds. As I say, guys, there's all kinds. And speaking of all kinds, there's all kinds of social media platforms that I'm resident within, in whichever way you'd like to look at it. So I'll put links back in the description for that. Also have a Facebook group, which you're welcome to join, of course, and you're welcome to check out my website too. All kinds of editorial on there you'll never see on this channel, so have a look at that too if you don't mind. And I'll be back with another video next week. Until that time, bye bye for now.